Hello, everyone, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. We're here for a special edition of our show this evening. Really glad that you're here with us. I don't want to waste any time. We have a lot to dig into here today. So without any more break, let me bring in our host and my good friend and colleague, Jean Marie Nevada.
Hey, Liz, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Well, we weren't planning on doing this, but here we are.
Here we are. I'm going to leave you to it. Actually, we have a lot of guests to get to, and I don't want to take up any more time with me.
Thanks a lot, Liz. Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National, and my pronouns are she and her, or ella if you speak Spanish. Every single week, we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And I will be honest with you, we were not planning on getting together this week. Our show is normally on Thursdays, and we had planned on spending it with families and friends. But after what happened in Colorado Springs this weekend, the team pulled together actually yesterday morning and thought we need to have a conversation and we need to give people a space to talk, a place to get some language to discuss what's happening, because silence is not an option. And if you will indulge me, I'm going to actually rely on some notes, because I'm going to admit to everybody it has been really difficult. And I am struggling a little bit with not being as angry as I am feeling inside. So what happened in Colorado Springs this weekend is not senseless. People call it senseless violence. It's not. It was bound to happen. It's bound to happen in a world where our political leaders legitimize hate and violence, where too many faith leaders add to this message by marginalizing people in their congregations, and influencers are encouraging hate and active violence against our community. We saw it at Pulse 6 years ago. We saw it with what's happening at Boston Children's Hospital, at Vanderbilt, and at Yale, and other healthcare facilities and clinics that are providing gender-affirming care. Death threats against staff and promises of attacks on facilities are the norm now. We saw it at the Dono Shop in Tulsa, where just announcement of hosting a drag show led to violence from an arsonist. We see it when libs of TikTok advances hate and conspiracy theories and directs people to where LGBTQ people can be found and harmed. This stochastic terrorism, and if you don't know what that means, we're going to be talking about that. It's real and it has real results, and we just saw what that looks like. We also see it when thought leaders like Matt Walsh call drag a cancer that requires an aggressive approach to stop. Or elected leaders like Marjorie Taylor Greene suggest that the quickest way to remove leaders like Nancy Pelosi from Congress is with a bullet to her head. I saw it this morning when I got an update from the Family Research Council, an organization claiming to be representing Christians. And it didn't mention a single word about the sanctity of the lives that were taken this weekend in Colorado Springs, because that would have meant acknowledging the humanity of our community. But they did manage to send out 3 articles talking about how to stop legislation that would advance LGBTQ equality. And we're seeing it just a day after 5 people were murdered and more than 2 dozen other hurt when a lone gunman entered Club Q at Colorado Springs and opened fire. But that gunman was not lone. His actions reflected the influencing legacy of countless people who have called for hate and hateful action. When that gunman walked into Club Q, he was joined by the silence of too many allies who say they care but remain silent when confronted with hate. He was joined by those inside of our community who refuse to call out and stop bias inside of our own queer spaces. He was joined by legislators who oppose common sense gun control laws, while they also advance legislation designed to destroy and demean us. But there is one thing that our community knows how to do, and it's how to take action and how to care for ourselves. It happened at Club Q when an unarmed, please hear that, an unarmed person in the club and others stop the gunman from causing even more damage. And tonight it's going to happen as we regroup and learn how to talk about this incident in unflinching language and find ways to care for ourselves. So before I bring in our panel for tonight's discussion, I want to start by focusing on PFLAG National's response. And for that, I'd like to bring in Brian Caban, PFLAG National's Executive Director. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Jean Marie. Thank you for pulling this together, you and the rest of the team. Hey, everyone. Brian Bond, pronouns he, him, and his. Really, it's important to be with you here tonight. That's pretty much all I can say. And I know, Jean Marie, you have some questions, but Like you, I think because of the kind of few days this has been, I'm going to apologize to you all. I probably will stay very close to my notes because this is too important.
Thank you. So I want to talk about PFLAG's response to what happened in Colorado this weekend. I was following along from the moment the news broke until the first time that I saw our statement. And I have to say the tone from PFLAG was angry. It was unflinching. And it really was pointing fingers at who is responsible for what we're seeing. So can you talk a little bit about where that statement came from, where that tone came from, which in some ways seemed very, very aggressive for PFLAG, and I think justifiably so. And what kind of responses have you had from people so far?
Sure, thank you. Candidly, I think we were channeling PFLAGers just right down the line on how people were feeling. What I've heard from people before and after their sentiments exactly. I mean, what happened in Colorado Springs is devastating. And our hearts go out to our loved ones there, including local PFLAG chapter at Colorado Springs, and the families that are on the ground, and our chapters across Colorado and around the country. This was the right message for us. We've spent 50 years doing this, and this is where we need to be right now at this space and time. And before we go into just my humble perspective on things and why we put out the statement we did, we have to look at this in a larger context too. And you alluded to that, Jean Marie. We're seeing rampant anti-Semitism and violence against Jewish people. It's not hard to connect the dots here of where this is coming from. Same when you look at Asian American space and the bias and the rhetoric and the violence going on there, as well as our Muslim brothers and sisters and siblings and friends and colleagues and allies for immigrants, for indigenous people and disabled people. The list goes on. This is orchestrated, but this is a conversation that involves all of us. We are collectively all part of those communities, and it's extremely important that we lift our voices. This isn't random. This is not random at all. This is orchestrated. I think you pointed out, there are some faith leaders. You sit in the pews expecting to trust what they're saying. There are lawmakers that people listen to. There are school board members. There are sites that spread information of hate, and with hate come actions, and they hurt people and they kill people, which is why we have to use our voice, which is why we said what we said.
And I think it was, I love the fact that you said that response very much was channeling the voices of PFLAGers, because that is certainly what we hear. I think there's been so much anger and so much frustration, but there's also, I think, a lot of sadness and a lot of damage going on right now, because, people often come to us when they need support. Someone comes out, and who do they call? They call their PFLAG chapter. This moment is no different. But so many of the helpers in our communities are experiencing trauma that they are dealing with from what we are seeing right now, flashbacks of the days after Pulse, and people are scared. So, Brian, for people who are advocates in our communities, and we know that so many of them are watching now and will be watching this broadcast, what do you want them to know about navigating this moment? Is it going to get better?
It is going to get better. It's going to be hard. I believe firmly in my heart that we are going to win this. The reason for this orchestration against marginalized communities is they know too that their grasp of what they think society is changing. We literally have to stay strong. There's just a few things I would say though. First and foremost, if you have gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, queer friends or family, if you haven't checked in with them, please do, because people aren't doing great right now, and nor are their family members. I think us holding each other tight right now is extremely important. Second, I know we're going to talk more about this, but be that ally. Put yourself out there. Do like so many PFLAGers do every day, using their voice to speak out on behalf of this community. And keep in mind, third, this isn't we live in a 24-hour news cycle now. When the dust settles on this, our work still's got to go on. It has to. And just because there's something new that the news is playing with, this is the ground game. This is what the other side has been doing for 40, 50 years. We have to stay in this game. We have to find that inner core, that inner strength of those we love, leading with love and passion and purpose on what we're going to do. And then when we get to January, sorry, I'll shut up in a second, January. When we get to January, you're going to have states that are going to do again what they did last year, bad things across the country. And we all need to be in this, fighting the vitriol, fighting the rhetoric, and hugging and holding each other and leading by example. We need to be in this. We will win this. It's going to take all of us, though. And again, I'm grateful for everyone who participates in the work we do, and for the staff and team and board and RDC and the PFLAG chapters around the country that do this and live this every day.
Brian, you know, my last question was going to be, what should people do? And you just gave people 3 things there. Please check in with people. Please recognize this is going to go beyond the news cycle. The news will move on to something else, but our lives do not. And please stay engaged after we get to January. Anything else? Last request.
Yes, Junior. One last thing. I've seen a lot in the news of the conversation around the safe space and it being a safe space that was desecrated. And that's true. And we all need our safe spaces. Our PFLAG meetings are safe spaces. But every space should be a safe space for LGBTQ plus individuals. That's what we're ultimately fighting for here. Yes, we all need a safe space, but this world, this country needs to be that safe space. That's why we're in this. That's why you get up really early every morning to do what you do. And so please, let's just keep that in mind.
Yeah, Brian, I love that point. It breaks my heart. I read so many articles where people said that Club Q was their safe space in Colorado Springs. And you're right. That should not have been it. Every place should be a safe space. We shouldn't have to carve them out.
And
you're absolutely right.
I honor, let's be clear, I honor that safe space, right?
Absolutely.
But we should be at a different space that we need, our point where we are, and we will get there.
And thank you for mentioning checking in on people. I think we're getting a lot of people who are doing the nod and saying no one even sent a text, no one picked up the phone, no one sent an email, and I'm feeling pretty disappointed about that and isolated. So thank you for saying that out loud. I think we're going to talk a lot more about that. And Brian, thank you for giving us, I think, so much freedom to pull things together like this. This is how we support each other. This is how we create those safe spaces. So thank you for spending some time with us, and thank you for what needed to be said that you did say.
Thank you.
So I want to keep this conversation going. I really appreciate Brian's remarks, and I appreciate all of you who are commenting on what you are hearing today. Please keep those comments going. Ask us questions. We want to support you. So I'd like to get talking about what got us to this point and what we're supposed to do next. And so I'm going to welcome back 2 guests back to the show who have been with us before, and also 1 new guest. So we are about to bring in Drennen, who is the LGBTQ Program Director at Media Matters for America. Heron Greenesmith, who is the Senior Research Analyst at Political Research Associates, and our newest guest to Something to Talk About Live, the Reverend Mykal Shannon, who is a pastor at Dynamic Faith Ministries. So I'd like to bring in our guests for the show now. Hello, my friends. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for giving us your time. So Heron, maybe we can start with you. And I'm going to do my best to direct this conversation, but I want this to be interactive because I think you all bring such interesting and different perspectives to this. So I just mentioned something about the silence that a lot of us have heard over the last 24-ish hours. And I was actually looking at some of your tweets. And one of the first messages that you actually had sent out was that we all knew something like this was going to happen again, and it was just a matter of time. Could you talk about where that came from? Because I know that a lot of people are saying the same thing. I certainly was one of them. What's your lens on this?
I was just looking back through, like all of us, I'm writing right now. I'm writing to process. I'm writing to preserve a moment in time so that we remember what happened. I'm writing to encourage others to stand up and continue and to donate. And I wrote this sentence in this piece. I wrote, "We knew this would happen again." And each word I cited to a piece from the past couple months warning of the increased scripted violence in the United States. And so just as a sampling of what I linked in that piece, the United Nations Special Rapporteur for LGBT issues, wrote that LGBT rights in the United States are being eroded and that we need stronger safeguards or something horrible is going to happen. That was in August. In the Boston Globe in September, the irony of the trans villain. The real violence comes from those who will trample trans rights. And I just wanted to pull out one more just from October 3rd, where the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the Children's Hospital Association all joined together to warn Attorney General Merrick Garland that unless the Department of Justice steps up for trans people, something terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
And something terrible happened. We call this scripted violence, where high-profile media personalities and government officials and spokespeople and leaders give militias and paramilitaries and neo-Nazis the script. And this summer, and even in the spring, spokespeople we were all watching it happen. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, just over and over and over again, without moderation, without answer, without investigation. So of course it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Of course it was.
It was bound to. And I think that's one of the very interesting things that I'm starting to see as these conversations happen today. And Ari, you've talked and documented extensively the power of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, but especially what's appearing online and how it influences violent behavior, that we are not just talking about words any longer. We are talking about a very specific kind of word and a specific kind of message. And so I think it really proved the accuracy of the concept of stochastic terrorism. And a lot of people are seeing those words for the first time right about now. So for those who are not familiar with that term, can you explain in the context of what just happened, what that term means and how it connects to the conversation, that we're not just talking about language, we're actually talking about more than that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really a pattern of radicalization where people are encouraged to, see a problem, hear all about a problem, and then asked to take matters into their own hands. And so, we've heard that time and time again. People in right-wing media, specifically in Fox News, though, of course, it's not nearly limited there, will say things like, "Where are the men?" And just kind of end it there. Or they'll go even further. They'll say, if somebody was teaching my kids about this, I would come in and teach them a real lesson. There's an especially chilling clip with Fox News host Tucker Carlson and Manhattan Institute muffing enthusiast Chris Rufo right before the election, where Tucker literally ended the segment by saying that people should arm themselves. And so, they've been laying out this pattern of arguing that that drag queens are, a threat to children, and then not just a threat to children, but a threat to your children, and that preserving civilization rests on stopping drag performances from happening, which is a deeply ridiculous premise. But if you hear it over and over again, and I cannot emphasize enough for people who are not glued to Fox News or glued to the Daily Wire all the time, the extent to which, this is a message that is playing multiple times a night all year, that people need to do something about this. And so when we say it seemed like it was only going to be a matter of time, that's why.
Yeah. Pastor Mykal, I'm certain that you've heard a lot of the conversation around the role of clergy in this, and around those who are religious leaders, because it isn't just about the media. It's not just about the politicians. Unfortunately, faith plays a huge role in this. And as a person of faith, it pains me to concede that. As someone coming from that space, as someone who does have a message of affirmation, of inclusion, how does this moment feel for you? And let's start with that. How does this feel?
This is, you have a natural response. I can't believe that this is happening again. But like everyone has said, we can believe it. We've seen it before, and it continues. Now, the faith arena is a safe space, but because we've had to kind of come from mainstream and create our own safe spaces, again, this sends a message that kind of legitimizes how people can come against us.
Yeah.
And it just goes on to, kind of perpetuate violence. And us as clergy or people that are in faith leadership positions, it really puts a heaviness on what it is now we have to carry, and then the support that we have to lend, because unfortunately it has happened. And, we're in a position where we're just holding our breath, hoping we can get over what has happened before something else transpires. So it's difficult for me. You have just like a lump in your chest, in your throat, going, this can't be my America,
Yeah.
Yet it is.
Yeah, yet it is. Yet it is. And I think you make such a good point about it's we keep getting these waves crashing on us of these things happening. And it's happening in the LGBTQ space. It's happening in communities of color. It's
Yes.
happening, specific religious groups are being targeted. Right now, Mykal, what message would you like some of these clergy members who are not practicing or sending a message of inclusion to hear? What is it that they're missing in this dialogue that they need to hear right now as we're having this conversation again?
If there are clergy that are not a part of these conversations, that are not saying anything, first of all, silence is acquiescence. There's no other way to look at that. And I know sometimes we feel like that is the position, that is maybe a safer position, but it's still the wrong one because nothing has changed. Yeah. So this is the time to lend your voice to the crowd. I'm kind of old-fashioned, and I still believe that there's power in number. So the more people that we can have come together, I think the more we can begin to eradicate this. It's going to have to come really from within our circle. Yeah. A lot of times we look beyond our circle and we hope to get more support when we say things like diversity and inclusion. But outside of our circle, people haven't really gathered that together. They know that diversity is there, but the inclusive part, they've kind of left to the wayside. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's going to have to come from the inside out.
And I appreciate you saying the silence is acquiescence. Audre Lorde told us your silence won't protect you. Martin Luther King wrote about how we remember the silence of our friends even more than the words of our enemies. I think more than anything that needs to be said right now. Now, and I want to throw this out to the entire group. Hate and violence against our community is not a new thing. All of us do this work. And one of the reasons we do this work is because we know the reality of this and we know that it needs to be stopped. But what is making this moment that we are in different than it has been in the past? There is definitely something that is different. It has felt more, the attacks on us have felt more aggressive online. What is making this different? And maybe Heron and Ari, maybe you want to start with this because you've been really monitoring the way this unfolds.
Yeah, I think there's this dynamic within right-wing media where there's so many different niches now and everyone's kind of vying for attention. This is an opportunity for different parts of the right-wing media to carve themselves out and establish themselves as, the voice of the true believers. And that's been a really dangerous dynamic on a more kind of, I don't want to say moderate scale, but in the debate about the Respect for Marriage Act just last week, for example, there was a kind of split approach where like Fox News didn't talk about it at all, but the hosts of the Daily Wire, who have been some of the worst people on LGBTQ issues all year round, were saying, if you vote for this, you can't call yourself a Republican anymore. So just the media landscape that we have today with social media has created a real race to the bottom in terms of who wants to be the most extreme and then who picks up the biggest audience because of that.
Heron, I read an article. It was I think a panel that you were doing, and you had made comments. They were talking about the hate frame and how this hate frame has really taken it from word to action in a very seamless kind of way. Is that an accurate capture of what is happening?
So the hate framework is something that we at PRA, Political Research Associates, where I work, trying to shift away from, because as we focus on the individual hateful actions of people, it actually obscures the systems. This is exactly what you were saying before, Jean Marie and Ari, like exactly, as we focus on, exactly what the person did in Club Q and point them out as a lone gunman, although I haven't seen as much of that rhetoric this time, then it obscures the transmisogyny, the misogyny, the biphobia, the queerphobia, the anti-migrant rhetoric, the anti-Blackness that infects transphobia. These are all systems that are working together to prop up the people in power who are replicating this rhetoric. Ari was talking about the people on Twitter, and Twitter is going to incentivize conflict. And conflict drives clicks, clicks drive ad views. So we are seeing not just the natural consequence of heightened rhetoric over the spring and summer into the fall. We're also seeing the natural consequence of the erosion of safety nets. We're seeing the natural consequence of unfettered online access now owned by oligarchs who are incentivized to break down public communication utilities. So this is, Club Q is not just what was going to happen if we permitted this rhetoric to continue. It was always what was going to happen in the United States as our systems continued to break apart. I think I read somewhere that Club Q was like the 630th mass shooting in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't even have the capacity in my heart to process that there are people having these conversations every day, 3 and 4 times a day.
Yes.
Mykal, do you want to build on to that? Because that's a huge number. And it makes me wonder, are we becoming numb to some of this?
It's a huge number. And I think to answer your question, Jean Marie, the reason why it feels different now is because when we look at legislation, when we look at our leaders, we know that we don't have the support there. And the rhetoric that's coming down, I think that there was a time that you could kind of depend on a more humanitarian just umbrella. And those times are gone. I'll be 60 next year. So I've lived through this shift of just culture to where, you know, when I was a kid, police really were your friends. They really did protect you. People did, quote unquote, you know, generally speaking, the right thing. And now I have lived to see such a big transition until this just feels much heavier. It has become saturated in our culture. It's not isolated situations anymore. It is, you know, it is really spread out to where now the subliminal message is this type of violence in marginalized communities is okay. It's okay.
And almost to be expected.
Yes.
Which
yes.
I think is actually even worse.
It is.
And I think that's such a frightening place to be. You know, Mackenzie on our team is actually let me know that a lot of people are talking about this issue of silence that has surrounded this. And why is that happening? Heron, I know that one of the things that you mentioned on Twitter was the lack of check-in from people who say that they're allies. And I actually was thinking about it. I got a number of texts yesterday, a number of calls and check-ins from people. Only one actually was from an ally to our community. And when I thought about that, it actually made me step back. What is going on here? Do you think it is that people are lacking the language to talk about this? Is it that this has become so overwhelming? Is there a lack of expectations on what allies should be doing at this moment, Heron? What are you seeing about this?
I think there is so much going on right now. We are still living in a pandemic. There is a resurgence of another respiratory virus among young kids. Gas prices and food prices are incredibly high. We are going into another winter. I know I don't absorb as much as I could of what's going on in my loved ones' lives when I am so full of tragedy. So I don't fault my non-queer friends for not reaching out. but I think it is worthy of notice that in other times, at other points, during other tragedies, we had outpourings of love that were beyond anything we could possibly imagine. I don't want to say that's not going to happen, but we haven't seen that level of coordinated response. I did want to respond a little bit. I wanted to make sure that we were raising in the room just the legislation from this year, because we cannot go without talking about how lawmakers from nearly every single state told their residents that their children shouldn't play sports with their friends, that little kids shouldn't be allowed to be safe in bathrooms in the school that they go to, that kids should not be allowed to access the most basic of life-saving care over and over and over again. And the news reported on these statements as if they were true,
Right.
not as if they went against the mountain of medical consensus.
Yeah.
This stochastic terrorism, this scripted violence, it has come from nearly every corner.
It is truly everywhere. And as I look at, and I really appreciate your comment about there is a lot going on. I don't think it was a concerted effort to not respond, but I think it really does raise that we do need to become more aware and have these conversations and find ways to cue them up. But responding is really difficult. Ari, I will admit that I was doing a little bit of following you around on Twitter today and watching you and you know, sort of in even the recent past, really tussle with the fact that not everybody is cut out for online interactions and for going, I think, to battle on this one. I saw some of your interactions with some of the far right cast of characters, and they were not just disrespectful. Some of them actually bordered on things that frightened me for safety in a very basic way. So beyond this debate, we're not just talking about debate, we're talking about potential interactions that could put people in danger. And not everybody is necessarily ready for that. What do you think people should be doing when they encounter hate online? It is everywhere. I mean, it is on, we've talked about Twitter, but that is certainly not the only place, because it doesn't feel like just arguing and saying we're going to disagree is an acceptable strategy. Are there any tips that you have on this? And are there any lines at which you say, maybe these comments should be escalated to a higher level?
Oh gosh, I think that's just one of those things that I just don't really let myself think about much. I'm so grateful that I get the chance to fight for my community. We need that, right? It just drives me absolutely up a wall to see the way that people just throw around casual hatred and bigotry towards LGBTQ people on the internet all the time for no reason. And I don't know. I mean, I just keep thinking about the victims of the shooting and just what a tragedy it is to have those lives cut short. And you know, I mean, I report all the time on very, very dangerous people, and I just think I just kept finding myself going back to like first time I ever left my house as myself, you know, and just that feeling of terror and just that vulnerability that anything could happen, you know, but that freedom that comes along with that you know, that the way I'm living my life right now, like I have so many people in my life who I know love me, who I love. I don't have any regrets. So, you know, if any of these people want to come after me instead of somebody else, like they can do whatever they want to try to do. I take a lot of personal precautions, and I'm just glad that I get the chance to show them that that we can't be bullied, that they can't stop us from being ourselves, that's something that nobody can ever take away from any of us.
You know, I so appreciate you saying it. I will tell you that yesterday, as everything started to unfold, I actually said to one of my friends, I was so grateful to do what I do for a living, to have a place to do something immediately. And it wasn't the most profound thing, but it was just knowing that we can get to work and produce something like this conversation. And that is why I am so really grateful to all of you for this, and grateful to what you do every day, not just showing up when something really goes off the rails. Mykal, you know, in times like these, a lot of people find themselves gravitating to places that try to give them support and comfort. And yet you and I both know, as most of us do, that for some of us in our community, that going to the place where you worshiped maybe growing up is not really an option. Or maybe people's relationship with faith looks a little bit different now. How do you talk to people in our community who have had struggles with their relationships around religion and faith at times like this?
At times like this, you want to make sure that you stay on the platform of love. Now, I know we throw that word around a lot, and love can't stop, unfortunately, the situation that has transpired in Colorado and many other places. But love is the undergirding and the pinnacle to what it's going to take to get through it. And I believe in that. This is what I teach. This is what I share. And we have to start with just the lives that we have access to. You know, if everybody could just take care of those people that they are connected to, that's ministry. It doesn't have to be an edifice. It doesn't have to be a building. It doesn't have to be a denomination. We all do ministry. Just showing up is ministry. That's how you let your light shine, right? So if you can go beyond that and give someone words of encouragement, you're doing ministry. So I try to make that is probably the pinnacle of me being a pastor, making myself available when somebody feels they're in trouble. That is the pinnacle, the communication, the love, the connectivity. They may not be able to find it outside of this inclusive circle, but you can definitely find it if you call Pastor Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. And, you know, I actually think I needed that little reframing for myself, because we don't always think, you're right, we sort of associate religion and faith with some sort of edifice, but it truly is our everyday interactions are the ministry we do or choose not to do some days.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that. That is, you know, in a time where you feel a little powerless, that's kind of a big power boost.
Yes.
So, you know, I want to keep our conversation going, but I know that we do have limited time. We have a little bit of time left, and I really want to focus on what happens next. And I want to hear from all of you, because anytime this happens, and we have all, I guarantee, done it when we heard about a shooting, we think, oh, wow, everybody's going to do their thoughts and prayers and swear that it's going to change this time. And it doesn't. And we just move on, and we find ourselves having the same conversation. And it feels really like a losing battle. Some of this gives me a sense of hopelessness. I would love to hear from each one of you. One thing that people should start doing to change the game today. What is one behavioral change that we can suggest to people who are listening, who are feeling like they have been robbed of control, robbed of some of their power? How do we get back into a place of power? Because we are there. We just need to see what that path looks like. And maybe, Heron, maybe we could start with you with your big suggestion, and we'll go to Ari and Mykal too.
I'm going to be so cheesy. There's that Mr. Rogers line of, you know, when something is bad, look for the helpers. And I realized in my kind of political journey, I realized maybe like 10 years ago, because I'm white, it took me a long time. There are people doing the work. There are people out there who are doing the work. There are people out there who are building community. There are people out there who are building services, who are building food pantries, and who are building medical clinics. And there are people who are building LGBT youth services organizations like Inside Out Youth in Colorado Springs. Please reach out to and donate to Inside Out Youth in Colorado Springs. They are going to need support for so long, because they are going to be holding the youth who will have experienced this for the next decades. So my recommendation is to do what I do, find the people who are doing the work, and just give them cash. We need continued sustainable infrastructure that we have built for us, by us.
Yes.
And since we live under capitalism, still the only way that we can continue to support those organizations is with cash. So give some money today, again, to Inside Out Youth Services in Colorado Springs. Set a recurring donation to an organization in your area. LGBT organization, food pantry, doesn't matter what it is, that is supporting folks with self-made infrastructure. We need to make our own systems. They work when we make them.
Thank you.
Yes.
I love that suggestion, and look to those helpers, but then support those helpers because they can't do all that work by themselves and it does not come for free. Ari, what about you? What is the action item that you have for people? Restore some power and control.
I mean, I think I found myself really inspired by all the trans folks who saw what was happening this year and went out and ran for office. I know that that's not something that's available to everybody, but think beyond the big offices. You know, like so much of the stuff that I've been tracking this year has come from school boards. It's come at a really, really local level, and you can show up for people there in a really big way, and just not be a horrible person. And you can make someone's life so much easier. You can make someone's experience in school so much easier. Some other space like that where some other adult might have so much control, and use it for a really bad way. So just, you know, I mean, I guess I just want to echo, like, show up for your community, and don't just, you know, ironically, for somebody who does a lot of their reporting on Twitter, we got to think beyond Twitter, you know, we got to think beyond spaces that a billionaire can just buy up and make worse overnight, because there are lots of other spaces out there in the world where queer people are living their lives and depend on having friendly people around.
Thank you. I think that's showing up, but showing up in really specific ways. I will admit I scrolled through all of the Victory Fund candidates who had won in this last cycle, and it actually it brought me tears, but in a good way, because I saw so many people who looked not like the average candidate who we expected running from our community. So many trans folks, non-binary folks, young people, people of color, people with intersectional identities. It only happens when we step up. So thank you for saying that, Ari. Mykal, what is the thing that somebody should commit to doing today that will actually start changing the game?
I believe that we have to focus on not letting the doubt that our eyes see shatter our faith that our ears can hear and our hearts can feel. I really believe in that. And I also believe, even as catastrophic as this situation is, we can't forget how far we have come. I know that we have a whole lot more work to do, but just 20 years ago, things looked very different as far as how visual we are now in community, the way grassroots organizations have grown so much. So we can't forget, it's not where we need to be, but we have come a long way.
And thank you for that reminder. Some people always say to me, your community did so much so fast, and it really is true.
Yes.
But I think we forget it because we end up focusing on the next crisis, and it feels like
Exactly.
There's always a new one.
Exactly. That's it.
Thank you for that. My friends, I am so very grateful to you. First, for everything that you do, not just when we're having a crisis, but the work that you are all putting in every single day that is influencing this conversation. I'm also deeply grateful that on a Sunday, when you got a panicked email from us at PFLAG saying, can you help out? You all immediately responded. And within a matter of an hour, we had pulled a show together, and you spent your time with us. I know you're doing a lot of work. I am very grateful to you. I'm grateful to the organizations that you are working for and with. And I'm really grateful for your time. So thank you so much for being here today. And that gets us to the end of this show. It was a little longer than we normally do, but I wanted to give ourselves the space to have the conversation. Thank you for being with us today. Please share today's show with people maybe who couldn't join, but really needed to have a conversation. And let's remember to show up for each other, even if it's just that phone call. Maybe it's volunteering someplace new in the new year. Maybe it's giving. Maybe it's not deciding to be silent just to keep the peace. Let's make sure we keep showing up, because that's the only way that we also move forward. So I hope that everybody remains safe. I hope you are taking care of yourselves. I hope you will check in with each other. We do wrap up the same way every single week, and we'll do it this week too. We remind you to run fast, to laugh hard, but most of all, to be kind. And in times like this, please remember that element of kindness, even when it sometimes pushes us a little bit. If you need help, please visit us at pflag.org/find to locate your nearest PFLAG chapter. Otherwise, we will be back with you in a week. I hope if you celebrate this week, you have a very safe holiday. Thanks so much for being with us, and thanks for everything that you are doing.